President Trump. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I read where she was not black, and then I read that she was black.
Vice President Harris?
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. We all have dreams and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right. We're talking about Salem's Lot, the 1979 version, on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from, I can't remember the town in Maine we're recording in. Anyways, this is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we're dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack all the goriest of details of 1979's version of Salem's Lot in the hopes that a townsperson's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust, and when I tell her where in Boston I got these cool looking red satin underwears, she won't just go telling everybody. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I mean, I might go tell people.
Yeah, I mean, he's very vague about it. Like Boston, Boston's a big town. What am I supposed to do? Just hit the city limits and then ask any Southie I come across, where do I get red satin underwears?
I do like that it's so scandalous. He has to go 90 miles outside of town to get these like fancy undies.
There's no red satin undies in Woolworths. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh my God. Look at Fred Willard playing this character.
Fred Willard playing the town's swinging dick is really about as 1979 as it gets. Now, originally when we had planned to talk about Salem's Lot, the first plan was to actually divide it up into two sections and take each night as its own thing. Then it was finally announced that Salem's Lot would hit Max in October. And they just said October, just the general notion of the month of October. And then finally, as if forced by, I don't know, somebody in charge, they're like, all right, fine. It's coming at the first week of October. You happy now? And we all were until we saw it.
Yes.
And then,
yeah. And then
so
that kind
then
of
we're
like that wet farting sound of a balloon deflating.
And so our schedule kind of got mixed around a whole bunch because honestly, I began to wonder, will anyone care about this if we wait until the 25th of October to release this episode? And based on the response that we've gotten, I think I was right. But there's no one is currently talking about that version of Salem's Lot. It has been memory hold.
Yeah. It's just like, well, it was not bad enough to be like, oh, you've got to see this. It's unbelievable how,
right.
But it's just so dedicated to mediocrity that it's like you watch it and you're like, yeah, I think I remember watching that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it is no Madam Web. It is not going to inspire a Morbin time internet phenomenon.
I mean, it may. I mean, knowing how these things work, a year from now, there'll undoubtedly be somebody say, that wasn't so bad.
Well, I think that is half the problem. It isn't so bad, but it isn't so good either.
It's not bad enough to be memorable.
Right. Yeah. It is not incompetent. There are things that are to be liked about it. And as we have mused in several recording sessions, if you know almost nothing about Salem's Lot other than the vaguest idea that it's a Stephen King vampire thing with a small town, you might be fooled into believing that it's a pretty faithful adaptation because you don't know any better, or you just don't care. And those are two perfectly fine things to be. I don't want to gatekeeper or anything, but I do have the feeling like there's enough competent, cool things about it that it might elevate the experience for those who just wanted a vampire movie. But upon watching this version of Salem's Lot, you can really tell the difference in terms of space and quality and understanding the material you have in front of you.
Yes. And why it pays to make it longer.
Yeah. It's just in our previous Salem's Lot episode, I in a burst of I'm going to make this count, God damn it, I kept asking the question, why remake Salem's Lot now? And, aside from, King's really hot right now, or, we have this IP and horror does well at this moment, we couldn't really nail an exact motivation for why Warner Brothers felt that when it came to a national mood or environment, now was the time to strike. Although there was plenty of impetus for that, because the movie itself doesn't really tap into any broader societal anxieties as a motivating factor. They're inherent to any vampire story. They're inherent to any horror film, but neither in the decade it's working to recreate, the 1970s, nor in the time at which it was filmed during the COVID-19 America lockdowns. It doesn't really evoke anything from, not to relitigate it, but upon reflection, having a few weeks of it just ruminating in my head, I don't feel it does anything to really capture those moments in any significant way, which I think is a lost opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
For whatever reason, it's just like, it's all just various touch points from the book in the most rapid fire manner possible, as if someone went in there and said, I don't think you need any of this. And they, just like a cartoon character, reached into the engine and started throwing parts out that you don't need, in that person's opinion, to make the car drive.
Well, yeah, but it's also, it's like, well, we won't pull all the spark plugs. We'll leave one spark plug. or like we'll deflate, all but the two rear tires, which is what I complain about with the sloppy editing, mm-hmm. where I keep coming back to the character of Floyd Tibbetts, sure. Where now in the 79 version, for whatever reason, because they just do that. There's a couple names. His name Ned Tibbetts instead of Floyd Tibbetts, but we'll just call him Floyd.
Well, it makes all the difference in the world, I think.
Right.
Upon just watching it.
He's not a major character.
No.
But he is sort of instrumental in getting the third act and the action moving in the third act.
Yeah.
Whereas in the 2024 version, he literally gets no dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's just in one scene, oh, that's Floyd Tibbetts. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you remember him, reader? You read the book. I'm like, yeah, he comes back later, right? Right?
Yeah.
He's the one that puts Ben in the... No, we're not doing that? Okay.
Yeah. One of the elements that the newer version just ejects entirely is this idea that this town is going to hell is not an active component to really make Salem's Lot work. And we argued quite vigorously for nearly an hour and a half about why that was a massive mistake. But that Tibbetts thing is just instrumental once you bring it back in. And I can't say that upon rewatching it here, that the world is, really blown out. You're not visiting every nook and cranny of this town.
No.
But it gives you enough of that to make it feel like the town is actually populated with more than just the 6 or 7 main characters you're introduced to. There are subplots. People interweave with one another. They have history that they examine. There's just more depth to it. Even Straker in this 79 version gets more time to ruminate. There's an open question, especially on night one of this, the first sort of hour and a half of it, right up until the point that, one of the Glick kids crawls out of the grave and bites a dude on the neck. That's the end of night one. But for a significant portion of this, he walks around like, does everybody know? I don't know.
He's very uneasy in certain
yeah,
scenes, which I thought was very interesting. Like when he is bringing home back to the house what is shown to be the wrapped up body of Danny Glick.
Mm-hmm.
Like he does not look like cool and collected. He looks like, oh shit, I gotta get this house.
He looks like if he fucks up in even the most minor way, he's going to get his soul torn apart Hellraiser style. He evokes a genuine fear of this boss that he works for. And that is an interesting take. One that we don't necessarily have to constantly compare them to, but it's an interesting depth to that character that is provided here that is just sort of abandoned in the speed run version of it. And I think it is those small nooks, bits of characterization, given a little bit of time to stretch and wallow in atmosphere that makes this more effective. It's not as slick and it doesn't have all the blood and it doesn't have all the guts. That being said, I do think it delivers on the blood and guts of Salem's Lot being a real place.
Yes. Yeah. It feels like a real lived in place. It's not, Norman Rockwell'd out like the town in the new version. It just seems like, kind of dreary little place you drive through when you're, up in New England leaf peeping.
Yeah.
Yeah. They keep saying like, oh, why would they open this business? Everybody like when Ben Mears returns to town, even the fact that, I grew up here, everybody still seems baffled. Yeah. Why would anybody move into this town?
Why would you come back here is an open question. And people look at him, outsiders, and the fact that he knows where Railroad Street is or orders a Canadian on the rocks. And people are like, oh, local. Why the fuck are you back here? And that's, I think, a real important component to a lot of King's This Town is Going to Hell fiction, and in particular Salem's Lot, for the type of thing he's going for in writing this. It has both more to do with vampire fiction and less to do with vampire fiction than a lot of stuff that you read before or after it. It's a unique mix that made it pop at the time. And when you go back to revisit the text, which I think you're doing right now.
I am currently. Yeah, I'm almost about. I've actually stopped right at the point where Matt Burke confronts Mike Ryerson in his house.
Okay. So there's a lot of, even though it's not one of King's longer books, which is interesting because the man has written some long ass books.
It's about 400 pages, which is a brisk read for Stephen King.
It's about 100 pages higher than my average mystery or thriller novel that I read. But it allows him time to get into these people's backstories, to sort of crawl into the back of their head and allow you to see out of their eyeballs of the condition you find them in before a vampire starts biting people on the neck. And a lot of these townspeople are desperate and broken and angry and mystified.
What an interesting pattern I noticed was how many of the characters, regardless of their age, basically are going through their lives acting as though, and possibly might be right, that their best years are long behind them.
Yes.
Like you've got Weasel Craig, who was, I guess, maybe in his 60s. He's a drunk, but he gets nostalgic over how he used to sleep with the lady that runs the boarding house. And you've got this teenage mother who is just convinced that her life is over because she has this baby she doesn't want, and her husband's a lousy husband. And just everybody is just barely clinging on and just like sort of accepting that this, bleak life is all they have left in this little town. So that, like when, and also everybody says about how, talks about how wonderful Susan is and how she's going to do big things. And it's like, because she wants to leave, and she might make it.
Yeah. She has the talent. It's circumstance that has brought her back to her
horrible mother.
Yeah.
One thing I was not prepared for in rereading this, and I don't know, I've read the book several times, is how often the other F word is casually dropped. And that is both in terms of what people think are going on with Barlow and Straker.
Yeah.
And also back a glorious time when being a writer.
Right.
If you were a man and you were a writer for a living, that put your sexuality into question, which I didn't know that was ever a thing, but
well, I think in that feels a little well-lived in terms of Stephen King's experience. Like the man knows how to put a writer in a story.
Well, yeah. So, and there's certainly, maybe not so much now, but certainly, 40, 50, 60 years ago, if you were a man who was pursuing, a life of the mind, let's say in a small town, rather than, I don't know, learning how to, change oil or fix a refrigerator, you were considered like, a layabout. And because, nobody makes money in writing books. And I say that growing up in a small town. So I'm not looking at it through, city bred, provincialness. I grew up in a small town, and there's, again, not so much now, but there was a sort of suspicion to acting as if you were, quote unquote, too good to get a blue collar job. Right.
And plus there's an anchor there that is pervasive, in that you have a lot of people in this town who were obviously sold a bill of goods in terms of, if you work doing this, you will earn a living and you will be happy. And then they are doing that, and turns out that it is difficult, tough, and it's drying up. And then you see this hotshot guy come to town with the world's tightest fucking jeans
and his fancy foreign car, and
exactly, and his big sensitive man glasses, and he seems to be doing well enough that he can just move back into town and type on a typewriter in the craziest manner I've ever seen in my life, Gina. Now, I am a professional writer, right? And up until recently, doing pretty well. But I have never typed with one arm wrapped around my keyboard and the other one 90 degrees above the keyboard and just plunking on single keys like I'm punishing it for existing.
Yeah, my wrists hurt just watching that.
It makes me like, I don't need to see David Soul pounding out 95 words a minute or anything, but that is an insane way to tell a story. I just don't think you could get anything done writing that way.
No. And yet, at least in the book, it's like casually mentioned that he had in a single writing session, he did like 12 pages. I was like, oh God, the dream to be able to write 12 pages in one day.
We don't know what the quality of those pages are. Let's just put that out there too.
That's true. I mean, he is naming his book Air Dance.
Which I don't know if it reoccurs in the book or not, but in here, he's asked, why do you call it air dance? He's unable to come up with an answer. And I think that should tell you a lot.
I mean, in the book, like he wrote a third book called something like Billy Said Keep Going. And I'm like, oh, okay. So your titles are just going to get worse with every book. Because Conway's Daughter, like, okay, fine. That sounds like that could be a plausible book title. But I don't even know what the fuck Air Dancer is, and let alone Billy Said Keep Going.
I don't know. Air Dancer to me has always felt like a subtle shade at something like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. That sort of.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're probably right.
Where it just feels like you wrote a book about this and like people like it. Says the professional writer at that point is kind of like, this doesn't sound like something that's going to bring anybody any money.
This probably exists somewhere online. If not, I should do it. But it's like someone should make just a whole a site listing all the like bad titles of fake movies and books and plays and like what was the name of the play, the musical, and The Fan? It was something like Never Say Never or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was something terrible. And the reality of it was terrible. Like that show would have opened and closed in the same night, if not for a near murder in the audience after the first preview.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify is there to help you grow. Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, and sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is how no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
President Trump, why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I read where she was not black, and then I read that she was black.
Vice President Harris?
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. We all have dreams and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.
But yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, writers seem traditionally unable to come up with good titles for their fake books, which I don't understand that.
Well, I think that there's both. I have to assume that part of it is meant to evoke something general that could be practically anything, because unless you're seeing actual examples of what's in that book, it's just like, would you see that title on the shelf, when this book was published, or, when this movie were to air on CBS? I could see that happening. It's general enough that you don't really know what it is. You don't get a flavor for what kind of writer Ben is or the stories that he tells necessarily. It sounds like he's making up things about other people, and he's reached an apotheosis of his life where he's like, I need to write about something that really actually drives me and not just make up a story. So I want to know more about the Marsden house, and I want to know if my idea is that the house itself is evil and it draws evil men to it, why was I drawn to it? Hey, that's an idea for a fucking book.
Yeah, well, and now that's what I think is, and as much as I'm at this point absolutely harping on the 2024 movie,
yeah,
is, one of the biggest complaints we had is that it completely omits the entire angle of the Marston house and its role in Ben's life and its role in the story, other than, well, this is where the vampires live.
Yeah,
there's a significance to that is both in the book, heavily in the book, and they managed to squeeze it into this in the 79 version in a way that does not feel clumsy or wrong.
Yes, it doesn't take up a ton of real estate, but they do have the time to sort of connect him and his fascination with the house itself, that you're intrigued to hear about what it is about it that has pulled him back to this small town. And the idea that this incident with him in his youth was so formative that he just needs to understand it just to move on with the rest of his life. Whether or not this is a book that he ends up selling or anything like that, it has more to do with like, listen, I'm not attached. I don't have a family. I don't have a significant other. Why don't I take my time and resources and examine this in a psychological way? And maybe I can understand that about myself, which I think is a compelling, motivating factor. And it takes just a couple of scenes to say what happened, to have him creep up on the house where you're like, he's really drawn to this fucking thing. I don't understand it, but I am interested in seeing him try to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it is not at all unusual for someone to use their art to try to work through a traumatic experience.
Yes,
but here, everybody's just so puzzled that A, he would come back to this town, and B, that he would write about the Marston house.
Yeah, well, they're too busy living their desperate lives. Is another thing,
but also looking uneasily at the Marston house,
right.
He's not making up that it has a sinister pull to it.
Yeah, and I might remind the audience, I won't read the entire thing, but like King's motivation for this is that essentially it's in the 70s and he's watching institutions crumble that were once, steeped in at least a veneer of accountability, and watching a president have to leave office because he sent people into Democratic National Convention headquarters to bug the joint and then erase 17 minutes of his personal tapes that he kept running in the Oval Office because he knew those were the times where he specifically indicated it's crime in time. And that disillusionment is what drives him to sort of take on what is it about American culture that's happening right now that I can reduce to a small enough place where it's not like, what is it about America? It's like, okay, what is it about the small town that represents America? And, how can I crystallize this fear into something? And his idea is that it's less about Dracula, but more about making vampires be an invasion of the body snatchers style story. And that this sort of crumbling of America has invaded everybody. And you get all those touchstones, woven into the mood of the book, that society, at least to the extent that King viewed it at the time, has lost its grip on what governance is, what effective governance is, that institutions don't have any level of empathy or compassion or moral center. you have a president who, previous to the 68 election, had colluded with Vietnam's military to continue the conflict in that country so that it would help swing the vote in his favor. That is not something that's happening now.
I was going to say,
no.
Good thing we moved past all that.
No, you don't have one of these candidates who isn't, talking to Israel behind the government's back, and then just magically North Korea is ramping up what they're doing. And, China wants to surround Taiwan right now. This shit is so fucking on its nose, trying to drive this country into voting a fascist into power. It's absolutely, it boggles the fucking mind.
Careful, we're gonna lose another listener if you keep
I'm
saying
sorry.
woke, Patrick.
I'm sorry.
Turn down the woke man.
It's not my fault that both Nixon and our beloved Don have an enemies list.
This isn't a podcast for commies.
Isn't it? Actually, no. I think we're both bad communists. I'll put that out there right now.
I like things too much to be a communist.
I wouldn't mind a dab of socialism, but, that's neither here nor there. It's just, as much as it pains for me to say, given that anytime we talk politics, we drive one person away.
Just one.
It's just like, you've got all of this shit in the background that he's kind of crystallizing into this one small town. And it's corruption. And what really drove it home is you brought up corruption as we were talking about the 2024 version, in that you have a priest who his faith is shattered. And then what Barlow does to him is not turn him into a vampire, but simply corrupt him so that he can never re-enter a church again. Before, he had a choice. Now he never has a choice. And
that is stone cold.
It really is. It's evil on a very interesting macro level. What I enjoy about Salem's Lot is that corruption element. And that corruption starts before Straker and Barlow actually hit town. The very origins of the town are steeped in satanic ritual and evangelical retribution. And the center of the town is this empty house, a place that Ben believes is evil at its foundation, and, quote, an evil home that attracts evil men. And Ben is scared because it attracts him too. That is complex. It doesn't take a lot of time to introduce that complex element into it. And yet I feel the book and this version, while slight in comparison to the novel, at least takes time to introduce it so that when these things happen over and over again, it's reinforcing that main theme.
Right, because it is the theme that drives the whole book.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not, the book isn't specifically about vampires, it's about corruption. And it's really interesting. Do you know when interest in media about vampires always increases around the time that there's an economic recession?
Gina, you read my fucking mind. Honestly, it is weird how we fucking mind meld across the country. Because as much as, like, we've discussed, there's several themes that have come up over us talking about vampires now for nearly a year. And obviously, when it comes to the OG of Dracula, there's always that fear of the outsider coming into a society and bringing along with them all these troubles that the straight whites don't want to have to deal with. And while that is still there, the sort of old money European gentry element of this is still a part of it. Like, Straker and Barlow start buying up property in Salem's Lot, and the town, it's got a healthy amount of fearful, unhappy people. who are already finding ways to prey on one another for some kind of small advantage. They're already corrupted on one level, and Straker and Barlow just push them over the line they've each wanted to cross already.
Right.
And
like in the book, the first adult that is approached to be turned into a vampire is Dud Rogers, who is the town, dump master, I guess. For
every town needs a dump king,
for lack of a better word, and
the town's dirty peanut. If he
is literally a dirty peanut, and he's kind of a pervert, and he's like ostracized because he has a hunchback, and he describes having some sort of, he's just not made correctly, for lack of a better phrase. And so Barlow, who's actually has been there the whole time, of course Straker keeps telling people that he is out of town, he'll be here any day now. I do love how much James Mason, who plays Straker in the 79 version, just relishes saying, you'll enjoy him and he'll enjoy you. Like served on a hamburger bun, if you get my drift. He's really having a lot of fun with it, with this role. And but like it's Barlow, who in the book, where I should say, obviously for me, I saw the TV movie way before I read the book. I don't know, had you seen the movie first?
I saw the movie. It was one of those things that had repeated on television, not on CBS, but it had been sold off. And so they had played it like on a Saturday afternoon, where normally they would play two movies. They just played it in its entirety. Mm. And I saw it before I ever read it.
So were you surprised that when you read the book and you see that Barlow is not a Nosferatu, he's just a guy?
Yeah, he's more of a Dracula.
Yeah, he's like a Bela Lugosi kind of European count. But anyway, he approaches Dud Rogers at the dump, and basically, he pulls the thing that a lot of vampires do. They just know things about you, right. And they know what you secretly want, and if you come over to this dark side with me, you'll get what you want. And it's all like, here, Dud, you'll be able to make this high school student your lover. You can't stop noticing the fact she doesn't wear a bra, and we don't know how old Dud is. Let's assume he's an adult, but he could be 20, he could be 40. It's unclear, but he's really obsessed with this high school student. And you've got Corey Bryant, who Fred Willard's character is an amalgam of two characters. It's, Larry Crockett, who kind of orchestrates the sale of the Marstead house, and
the Salem Lot's useful idiot, right?
And then you've got this other character, Corey Bryant, who's like the local hot pants who is sleeping with another man's wife. Yeah. And when he is caught and tormented and threatened, again, Barlow approaches him, says, "Wouldn't you like to get revenge on him?" It's just like, it's never anything like, if you become a vampire, you can do these nice things like live forever or be with the person you love for all eternity, just like you always wanted. No, it's no, you can get revenge. No, you can indulge in whatever sick little perverted fantasy you have. And it's just like, yeah, you're right. They knew what town to come to.
Yes. This
is not random. None of this is random.
It is absolutely purposeful. And, King does a very good job of setting up all these dominoes to fall in a very specific direction. Straker and Barlow are not, this is almost the opposite of vampires are bad planners. These vampires are good planners.
No, this goes back to how Floyd Tibbets, Ned Tibbets, whatever you want to call him, is has an important role for not being a major character. Yeah, they are aware that Ben Mears is a problem, that he is on to them, and may understand things in a way the rest of the town does not. Yeah. So what do? Now in the movie he is changed into a vampire after attacking Ben Mears. But in the book, he is already kind of in the transitioning to a vampire stage. Like, it mentions how he's wearing a hat and he's got like a coat on, and like you basically try to protect himself from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, here, minion, go distract this guy by beating the ever-loving crap out of him and putting him in the hospital, so he'll be out of the way for a little while. Don't kill him. That'll look suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need more outsiders coming in here. What we need to do is isolate him within town so he's out of action, so that he's not, bringing more people to his side, and they start to take active action.
Because if we kill him, someone might come looking for him at some point.
Exactly. To reinforce your point, Gina, in terms of all of these side characters that Straker and Barlow managed to turn, I am reminded of film scholar Noel Carroll in his book Philosophy of Horror. And he defines a monster in a horror movie as, quote, an extraordinary creature who participates in a cultural taboo. And all the things you're describing of, it's not that you want to live forever. It's not that you want to be beautiful. It's, don't you want petty revenge? Don't you want to take actions that you otherwise would be held accountable for?
Don't you want to hurt people that hurt you?
Yes. You're emasculated. You don't feel power. You feel like an outsider. Well, all that goes away when everyone in town becomes a vampire. And then we just spread out from there. We always have this hub. And as such, it's a interesting touchstone when it comes to othering that is particularly resonant when it comes to the fiscal conditions that we live under capitalism. Now, this next little bit, I'm going to crib a little bit from a young woman on TikTok who goes by the handle of Kenna. She has a fantastic breakdown of how the vampire in fiction is tied to economic fear. Run, do not walk to follow her, but I don't want to, take part of her thoughts and her research and claim them as my own. You should check her out. She's fantastic. She says it smarter than I will, but please allow me to clumsily try to, regurgitate this, because this was in back of mind when we watched 2024, and there didn't seem to be any reflection of what life was like in America in the 70s. It's just an aesthetic there. But I'll grant you that what she was talking about had more to do with the recession vampire of True Blood and Twilight. But those sort of vampire stories relate to that special white woman who, by contact with a vampire, gets to attain power and privilege they wouldn't otherwise get, because these rich ass thin white dudes just happen to have been rich because they invested well, in some of these stories, like let's say a True Blood or Vampire Diaries, because they invested well in a slave-based economy. Like, you can't get to that level of economic power without draining another person. And if there is anything a vampire is, it's someone who gains power by draining another person.
Right. And also, you have this sort of hierarchy where you have, Barlow, who gives orders to Straker, who gives orders to Crockett, who gives orders to these two dudes to go pick up this sideboard. I had to Google what a sideboard is. I've always wanted to know. And I was like, oh, that's what that is. Okay.
Well, we both live in smaller domiciles. I don't think either of us have room for sideboards.
I'm pretty sure my grandmother had a sideboard. I'm pretty sure everybody's grandmothers had a sideboard, because that's what you needed. That when you used to have I don't know if you and Becky got wedding china. Presumably you did. It's probably packed away somewhere, because who eats off a wedding china anymore? But it was for when you had large sets of china. But anyway, I'm going off track. But everybody, there's a hierarchy of there's minions, and it all goes back up to Barlow, who everybody is ends up at least inadvertently serving.
Yeah, and they become cannon fodder for Barlow as the story goes on. Like if anyone does catch wise to what's happening in Salem's Lot, they're more likely to, fall under the sway of one of his minions. But even if they do find their way out of one situation, what are the chances that they can kill 2, 3, 5, 25 vampires to get to him?
Right.
It's just one of those things that evokes a level of, if anything, Barlow is kind of like a modern billionaire in which he has all these weirdos who will jump out in front of any criticism of him. Take that bullet for themselves.
Are we dealing in metaphors again?
How dare we?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Vice President Kamala Harris.
I get it. The cost of rent, groceries, and utilities is too high. So here's what we're going to do about it. We will lower housing costs by building more homes and crack down on landlords who are charging too much. We will lower your food and grocery bills by going after price gougers who are keeping the cost of everyday goods too high. You work hard for your paycheck. You should get to keep more of it. As president, I'll make that my priority.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley's small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Everybody sleeps, but no two people sleep alike. At Coop Sleep Goods, we celebrate the way you sleep differently. We believe everyone deserves a great night's sleep with their own pillow. And the adjustable, customizable Coop pillow makes it easy. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or even a starfish, we've got the perfect pillow for you. Crafted with our innovative memory foam and microfiber fill, our hypoallergenic pillows adjust to you, not the other way around. Just tailor the fill for the perfect fit. Add some in, take some out, until your pillow's just right for you. See why luxury hotels and spas worldwide feature Coop Sleep Goods, and why we have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. With our 100-night risk-free trial, you've got nothing to lose, except those sleepless nights. Get 25% off your first order when you visit coopsleepgoods.com/comedy. That's COOP sleepgoods.com/comedy.
I will say that it is interesting, and this is true of the book too, that Barlow actually turns out to be fairly easy to kill.
Yeah.
But as opposed to a lot of other vampire media, killing the head vampire does not, in fact, rid everybody else of the curse as you were. So, I mean, if anything, it is worse because now they have nowhere to go. Now they don't have they don't have anybody to tell them what to do. So at best, they'll just kind of gradually spread out over the country because they are they're looking for blood, they're looking for fresh meat, they're looking for someone to guide them.
Yes. It's almost as if they were members of a cult who idolized this one person who's always told them he had the answers to all their problems. Now, he even had opportunities to fix their problems, and he managed to fuck that up. But it doesn't matter. So long as you continue to follow the teachings and sayings and will of this cult leader, everything's going to be fine. And then lo and behold, when they are by fate, by karma, their weakness is shown, and they are, while it takes effort, dispatched. And now the cult is dispersing into its own fiefdoms, and they're even more ravenous than they were before. Not that this has anything to do with what might happen in just a month or two, Gina.
We're going to lose so many listeners.
I don't fucking care. Unfortunately,
no,
the same thing was true when King was writing this book in the midst of a Carter is dealing with, beat back inflation now.
But the thing is, Patrick, is I don't think you are forcing any of these metaphors. I really don't. I don't think that any of this is a stretch. Which is,
unfortunately, is not.
No, I don't think you are trying to make a tortured point. It all makes sense.
It's just one of those things that it started political. The ideas are inherently political. King refines them into a specific time that, like poetry, always rhymes over and over and over again. It's why they say if you don't listen to history, you're doomed to repeat it. Because even the people who learn from history are surrounded by people who would just rather not.
Well, yeah, that's what I think that Salem's Lot, even though they're not really, connected in any meaningful way, it is a good companion. Well, I should say that it expands a lot upon a lot of the themes of Salem's Lot.
Yes.
And also has a lot of, metaphors to reality, in which, one of the most haunting aspects of it is how often these terrible things happen to children and adults can hear it and see it, and they look away. And it's just, it could be applied to so many things. It could be applied to child to pedophilia in the church. It could be applied to child abuse, in the house next door. It could be applied to how often we have failed our children. It could be applied now to, the failure of making sensible gun laws, and just the biggest sin that adults can commit is looking away when children are in trouble.
I could not agree with you more.
And here it's just like, people know this town is shit. And they know that Reggie Sawyer beats his wife. And they know that Sandy McDougal beats her child. And they know who's screwing around with who, and who's a pervert, and who's wearing women's underwear under his clothes. Because the whole thing is that you've got this one character, Mabel Wirtz, who's like the town gossip, and you've got this shared phone line. That's something Stephen King loves in his early, his like pre-1980 books, is these shared telephone lines, which I grew up in a small town, not quite that small. we did have regular private phone lines by that point. I can't even imagine what it would have been like trying to make a phone call on a party line, particularly, something, you want to keep personal. Everybody knows what is going on in this town, and nobody's doing anything about it. They're just like, it's all gossip. It's, well, what can you do? That's them. I'm over here next door to them, and it's like, and again, I don't mean to be like, oh, all small towns are inherently bad, because, big cities have their own unique problems, but they are of a piece in the benign fear of being in a small town, and knowing that there's evil among us and nobody doing anything about it.
All it is a microcosm look at a macrocosmetic issue. It just reduces the amount of players so that you can get to those themes more quickly. Just returning to your it point, especially when it comes to gun violence, I do not think it is a coincidence that in 2017, it connected that hard with a generation of millennials and those younger than them, because they were raised in school environments in which the threat of gun violence is ever present. And there was an incident with my son just last week. He was at a football game. There was not an actual gun there, but the word gun was yelled after a loud noise. And that's all it took. People went reflexively into the things that they have been trained to do because that is something they are forced to live with, because they live in a society that refuses to act to protect them. And if of anything, what happens in Salem's Lot and what happens in Derry are just supernatural things that you put on top to, make a terrible reality palatable via fantasy. And that's what we're dealing here with. Like, that is what makes horror fucking compelling. And if you love the surface level stuff, and I do too, I don't get it twisted, but there's this other component that makes it so much more fascinating and real and in depth to be able to confront these things, or at least examine them in some palatable way to make you think about them. And that makes fucking horror special. God damn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said,
I like the horror that's about trauma, frankly.
Yes. And I
certainly
also understand the
about
impulse to not make everything about that necessarily.
Of course, but I do tend to prefer the ones that I think about more.
Mm-hmm. It's true that what I feel we need to find a recentering on, and let's use slasher movies as an example to get away from vampire for a second. But just having read an article in Fangoria about this with Stephen Graham Jones, in that there was a time in which a final girl had one bad night. And that's what makes that appealing in terms of storytelling, is it is true of almost all of us, in that something happens that it comes out of the blue and it changes you from that moment on. We don't really live with them beyond that one bad night, but that one bad night we come into it and we can self-insert in the sense that shit fucking happens, unfortunately, and you don't foresee it. Post Scream, you have a final girl who, in many circumstances, not all, but many, is the person whose past has prepared them for that moment, or maybe the very cause of that moment. And it's a very different type of experience. And I feel like it would be better if we had more of a balance. That is not to say that trauma does not come into play, because you can read trauma into Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween and Salem's Lot. It's all in there. But it's like, maybe one or two we try to give people a little bit of a popcorny feel, like, oh shit just happened right now. Yeah.
Well, it's like, you can't do an exhaustive deep dive on everything. Sometimes it's like, we just did a Patreon episode on a slasher movie that takes place in a grocery store. Right. And it was very silly and, very entertaining. But, we didn't try to do some, dive into, what the deeper meanings might be.
Right. What that is an economic horror in the fact that the incident at its core is that you have a failing business.
That's true. And the killer is someone who's upset he's about to lose his job. I mean, whoops among us.
Right. And the survivor is someone who managed to extricate themselves out of a domestic violence experience, and that's sort of being revisited upon her. Like, you could take it in that direction. It's more interested in sawing heads, Yeah. So now that we've talked philosophically about this version of Salem's Lot and everything it brings to the table, let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of it, because I do think they are interesting. Are they as glossy as the newer versions of it? No. But as we've stated, because it has a little bit more breadth to it, because they have to occupy 2 nights of time, you get just a little bit more depth to everything that's happening. I don't think this particular Salem's Lot is any more heavily populated than the 2024 version upon revisiting it. It just manages to find a way to introduce more characters and situations into it that make it feel more populated.
And there's a noticeable difference throughout the movie when, like, there's, you know, quite a few scenes of Ben just driving through the town.
Yeah.
You can subtly notice less people each time he's driving through town. And I appreciate that. I mean, yes. I still think that both versions, I don't remember if the 2004 version is such a blank in my head that I don't even...
And really, I remember that certain people are in it,
yeah,
but what happens to them or how it goes.
All I remember is that their Barlow is just a guy, because it's Rutger Hauer. But like, I do think that both versions lack from more scenes of people encountering vampires. Not so much Barlow, but like, you know, again, probably a scene that caused me to lose sleep when I was a kid. One, the first time I'd read the book was the baby, and the woman discovering that the baby has died. And then you realize, oh, the baby got turned into a vampire because the baby shows up later as a vampire. The baby turns its own mother into a vampire. And I think that you need a few more scenes of people being confronted with the horror of a friend or a loved one or a child or their spouse, turned into this unholy creature, and then ultimately giving in to them, whether because it's mind control or because, well, I'd rather be with them this way than not be with them at all. I think that, both versions really lack from more of that, but I understand time constraints and all.
I have a question for you. How much of the Starker Barlow stuff is just a plot to sell antiques? Like, have they gathered so much stuff at this point? Like, how much antique buying did they need to sell this idea of moving to Maine to open up an antique shop? Or is that just something that Straker brought to the table? I think that was a Straker thing, and I think this is just their cover to kind of move about the world and decimate a little town, and then move on to the next part of the world and decimate that little town. I mean, it is mentioned, at least in the book, numerous times that the antiques are priced at a level far beyond the average citizen of Salem's Lot can afford. Mm-hmm. And that, they must be relying on, tourist traffic. I'm like, what tourist traffic? You gotta get tourist traffic? That is something they also bring up in the 79 version of you're up here visiting. You're very early for someone visiting us at this point. And you're like, what is high season for fucking Salem's Lot?
They want to hang out at that cool 50s style diner that Ben and Susan go to, or that Billy Joel scene from an Italian restaurant.
Oh, that restaurant is so good. Oh.
Can't you just picture little 6-year-old Patrick being taken there with his parents? The restaurant looks like that with his parents.
Oh man, I would have ordered fried shrimp so hard.
Oh yeah. Fried shrimp and ravioli, baby.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, no, yeah. To seriously answer your question, no, I think that was Straker's deal, and Barlow looked upon that as pretty keen cover for their dark deeds.
Because there's that one scene where I think he's talking to Fred Willard, and he's bringing out cane after cane after cane, and all of them look like something you'd kill a werewolf with.
It's where's your? I need to know your market plan for this, Richard Straker.
I get that they don't need money, but also at a certain point, you have to display something in the shop that someone would fucking buy. It's just like, oh, I need a cane. Go get me something with a dragon on it from the local antique shop.
Can you get me the one that has an actual fox skull in the handle?
I need something that looks like a human femur with a bone, the skull carved into it. That is a statement piece. That is not for somebody who needs to lean. That's not therapeutic.
That statement is, I will split your fucking skull with this thing.
Like, people who actively have decorative canes, let's say your stereotypical 1970s pimp, would also look at some of those canes and go, that's a bit ostentatious. This is coming from someone who has platform shoes with an aquarium inside the platform. Which I don't believe is something that an actual pimp in any media has ever worn outside of "I'm gonna get you, sucker." And yet that was the place I went.
Well, you saw it happen when you move too fast, it just break.
Well, that is the thing about being a very successful pimp of sex workers, is that you don't have to get anywhere fast. That's why you need the cane, because it's hard to balance. It's too hot to wear a fur, and yet you're doing it. Why? You can afford it. One big difference in this version of Salem's Lot versus most of the others is that everyone in town immediately wants to fuck Ben. He's like red raw meat in a town full of lions.
They are. Yeah, everybody is looking at him. You know, I think it is supposed to be suspicion, but it is nothing else. Great interest, let's say.
Right. He's confounding, and Straker and Barlow are confounding, because why would you go to a dead end if you still have enough money to afford that kind of canery, or you're a successful, supposedly, author?
Right. It's like, you know, who the fuck are these people?
This is inherently suspicious, because if any of us had any ability to leave this town, we probably would.
Right. It's like, you know, it's almost like, you know, oh, you're kind of mocking us because you don't have to be here. You can leave anytime you want.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot to like about this version. And the one thing that I bump up against, which is revisiting a theme from Friday the 13th, is like Ferndale, California, which is where this was filmed, is very brown to represent Maine.
Well, it is supposed to be the fall. Well, no, I guess if it was fall, it'd be very colorful, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, it doesn't have that. It is both green in terms of that it has northern pine trees, and brown in that all the ground cover is dead because we live in a high desert. So it just doesn't scream Maine.
I mean, at least you don't have a palm tree in the back, like in the yard of the Marston house.
Yeah, at least they go to Northern California to do this. They don't get it anywhere. I'm sure there was a lot of Warner Brothers, you know, sound stages in use for interior scenes, but they never, you know, venture out to like where they filmed MASH to approximate Maine.
One issue I had, because I as you said, I am rereading the book right now, and again, it is a masterpiece. If you have not read it, what are you waiting for? Stop listening to this right now and go read it, because this is the perfect time of year for it. One of the issues this is not a perfect adaptation. I would say that so far the perfect adaptation is, and I am hardly the first to say it would be Midnight Mass. Who does have, you know, and you know, Mike Flanagan gets that, you know, economic fear looming over everything else, possibly, you know, scarier than vampires.
And because he has the time and the space to do it, and he makes the most out of it.
Right. It's a minor quibble, but I feel like the actors playing a lot of the characters are about 10 to 20 years too old for their characters.
Right.
The two biggest ones I have a problem with, like Mike Ryerson, he's played by Jeffrey Lewis. So if you ever seen a Clint Eastwood movie in the 70s, he was in it. He's just like, you see that guy, some shenanigans are about to happen. But yeah, he's got a very familiar face, but he is way too old for this character. It is mentioned that Mike Ryerson is like not exactly freshly out of high school, but maybe 25 at the oldest. And he's about 40. Lance Kerwin as Mark is 19, playing a character who's supposed to be 12. And
he looks like he's a fucking college student.
Yeah,
that is the one thing that the newer version gets a lot better.
Yeah.
Like, these are kids.
These are supposed to be kids. Like when the dad gives him a hard time in the book about being obsessed with magic tricks and monster movies. In the book it's like, lighten up, Dad. He's 12. Here it's like he's like, he looks like he's about ready to leave for college. He probably shouldn't be doing, far be it for me to criticize anyone for an obsession with monsters, but you probably should be giving up the funny magic tricks by that point. But
and one of the things that this one does that I really enjoy, because it adds another level of complexity to it, is that Mark Petrie has parents. You see them before they die, and you can tell that there's a strain in the family. You're not exactly sure what it is. But when Mark's dad comes in and is like, when are you going to give this stuff up? He's like, he wants to relate to him, but he refuses to meet him in any sort of, he's like, you have to just abandon this and take on whatever I want you to talk about so that we can relate. He never attempts to meet him in the middle. That doesn't have to be explained. You don't have to have scene after scene after scene of that. It's very subtle. It comes across and you're like, I get it.
Right. And I feel like, Davis Soul's probably a little too old to play Ben Mears.
Yeah.
Bonnie Bedelia Susan, a little too old to play this sort of like, ingenue Mary Tyler Moore type who's going to make it on her own. and again, she's probably only in her 30s here, but
right. If barely.
Yeah, the character's supposed to be like definitely in her early 20s.
Yes. And she's had one attempt out of college to make it, as you said, Mary Tyler Moore in New York City. And upon that failure has slunk back home.
Right. And now
it's like,
now her mother, her mother has decided she's just better off, marrying and having babies.
Yeah. Like you had your attempt and you sowed your wild oats. And honestly, get with this plumber who appears to have a very shitty attitude.
You don't really get to know Floyd as a character before it becomes obvious that he's going to be a problem in the book. But like in the movie, you're like, oh, this is the guy that the mom prefers over Ben.
Right. Like he has almost no charm to him whatsoever. The guy who's like
stalking her outside of her job.
Yeah. It's like, what does he have going for him? Well, he has a lot of available time to skulk outside of my workplace.
What he has going for him is he's got a job.
Right.
And he's got I don't remember if he was a plumber in the book or not, but he had a steady job.
Yes.
And that was the most important thing, understandably, to Susan's mother. But
as opposed to Ben, who he got some books published. How can that possibly happen again? It's certainly not reliable.
But the good job comes at the cost of, maybe he'll be a little aggressive in showing you how he feels about you. And I mean that is not explicitly stated, but you kind of get the idea that Mrs. Norton believes that a good wife puts up with a lot of bullshit. If it means being taken care of by her husband.
And she has one example of, a person who obviously has a lot of time where his personal life is taken over by his job because he's the town doctor. But on the other hand, he's also wearing one of the most aggressively incongruous pieces we've ever covered on the show.
Poor Ed Flanders.
I mean, Just let the man have his own hairline. There's nothing about that piece that screams, this is someone I can trust.
This is just it's a straight Brillo pad on his head.
It is so out of place with the rest of his skull. It's like an invading force. It sticks out. That being said,
I just wanted to see like when Straker comes out and puts basically mounts him on the antlers. I just wanted to see like James Mason just like curl his lip in disgust, like, give me that, before like, snatches off his head. Before he, like,
who do you think you're fooling?
This is terrible. How dare you bring this atrocity in my home?
It neither goes with your current hair nor your skin tone.
The final humiliation.
I think I'll put this on one of the skulls I have on one of these spare canes. It'll make more sense. We're turning into Tibbets again. The miniseries here, Hooper shows you this without showing it to you with the Sawyers. Because there's nothing more Stephen King in the world than an angry working class guy powering his way through a sixer of shitty beer.
Right, exactly. That is a Stephen King special.
And then what it also gives you is one of those moments where you can tell this is a Tobe Hooper directed movie. And I hate to bang this fucking drum yet again, but you can tell a Tobe Hooper movie from any other film because there will always be moments in which you see people be driven past the point of normal sanity. There's a line which people cross either because they build themselves up to it or circumstances drag them across it. And when Cully is holding a shotgun to Fred Willard's head and telling him to close his eyes, that scene is straight Tobe Hooper, baby.
Yeah, and the funny thing is the in the book it's actually a little more subtextual, because I think if I haven't gotten to that part yet, and I'm trying to recall from what I read in the past. I believe he makes him put the gun in his mouth in a suggestive way, and I definitely remember that like the character was named actually Corey Bryant. Yeah, I if I recall correctly, he does in fact shit his pants. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't?
And also just one of those Stephen King touches where he's like, listen,
it's got to be total humiliation.
It's got to just remove somebody from any sense of a semblance of like holding on to their humanity. It just have to take it one touch past that to really drive the point home. But like Cully's a wife beater here, and he's going to punish his wife. God knows living with him at his house cannot be fucking fun. And that also brings up another thing that the miniseries has that I don't think is really a part of the book or the newer versions, which is there's a lot of heart attacks happening. There's a lot of people who are just cracking under the pressure.
Yes.
I just there's that, and even the autopsy scene again. Like upon seeing, I'm like, oh, I like this version too, just as much, because I don't think David Soul is the world's greatest actor. He is at best a 70s guy in the world's tightest pair of jeans. And that is a moment where I go, hey, he is trying the fuck out of doing the Tobe Hooper thing. He is seeing something that while he is aware is happening, in his heart of hearts would rather not be happening. So when Mrs. Glick sits up with fucking vampire teeth and eyes you can't look into because they'll hypnotize you, and he's trying to bless a cross that he's made out of tongue depressors, his mind has fucking broken
Right.
in that circumstance. And Tobe Hooper fucking brings it. He allows him to get to that place, put it on camera, and you can go, hey, David Soul really working in this fucking role.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
President Trump, why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I read where she was not black, and then I read that she was black.
Vice President Harris?
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. We all have dreams and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Everybody sleeps, but no two people sleep alike. At Coop Sleep Goods, we celebrate the way you sleep differently. We believe everyone deserves a great night's sleep with their own pillow. And the adjustable, customizable Coop pillow makes it easy. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or even a starfish, we've got the perfect pillow for you. Crafted with our innovative memory foam and microfiber fill, our hypoallergenic pillows adjust to you, not the other way around. Just tailor the fill for the perfect fit. Add some in, take some out, until your pillow's just right for you. See why luxury hotels and spas worldwide feature Coop Sleep Goods and why we have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. With our 100-night risk-free trial, you've got nothing to lose, except those sleepless nights. Get 25% off your first order when you visit coopsleepgoods.com/comedy. That's COOP sleepgoods.com/comedy.
Like I said, I think he's a little too old for the part, but he's not
Yeah.
bad in it.
No. And I think what it asks him to do, he is gamely attempting to do. And I think the sort of, this is like the end of David Soul for a long time. He never quite recovers from Starsky and Hutch. And this is one of those things where they've asked him to go outside of that framework. And I feel like he acquits himself rather well. And Hooper is not going easy on him. He is trying to get him to crazy, nervous, eye jittering, cold sweats, my brain is broken levels of acting.
Well, what I think one of my favorite scenes, and it's funny because it's where I left off in the book, is I really think the scene where Matt Burke, in the movie they just changed the name to Jason. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure. Maybe they said what we said. They thought what we said, that you can't have a Matt and a Mike in the same.
That's a change I'm for. Yeah.
When he confronts Mike Ryerson. Who's the actor? Lou Ayres? Is that?
Yeah, that's
again. He's also a little too old for his character.
Is it 70s? Are these people secretly 45?
That's true.
We don't know.
He could be 60 here, but look like 80.
He comes across as too old to be doing this.
But there's just something so poignant. He just looks so scared, and he's like a little scared little old man. And I'm like, I'm just like, oh, I want to protect you. And like, he's like, I want to look, but I can't look. But I kind of want to look, but I can't look. And he's like, oh no, get out. And I'm like, and it's just such a, you could just, because again, the pacing is so much better here. This scene is actually drawn out surprisingly long.
Yeah.
Like you have him slowly making his way up to the room, and then you kind of see him just sort of reacting to what he's seeing or not reacting to it because he can't believe what he's seeing. And then you kind of have you see this internal debate over, well, I could, make this easy and just give in to him, or I could try to, fight back. And then he eventually does fight back.
Yeah.
And then he has a heart attack and we never see him again.
Yeah. He's gone.
Yeah. In the book, he dies eventually, but I think he's had another heart attack. But here it's just, he had a heart attack. And then there's no mention of him after that.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, just doesn't have the time. The plot is moving so fast at that point, it can't really.
Right. Yeah. I don't think, this is all the second half, and that just zips right by.
Yeah. One question I have about Mark Petrie. Does he live in an entire wing of his family's house? That is the largest room. Not since The Bionic Woman have we seen a child's bedroom be what appears to be the entirety of my house.
It takes him a long time to walk from his bedroom to the window.
really does. Like, holy shit.
I'm sitting in my room right now, and it probably would take me about 10 steps to get to my bedroom window.
It is one thing to give the camera more room to move around. It is another thing to give the floor plan, like the Oval Office isn't as big as his bedroom. There's
one scene near the beginning of the movie where he's in there and Ralph and Danny Glick are there and his dad comes in. There's still room for like 10 other people to fit comfortably in that bedroom.
He can have a fucking party, and that is just his bedroom. And yet their kitchen is so tiny.
I do like that kitchen scene too. That is great.
Yeah.
That I just think about, because 70s horror is charming. Well, I say 70s TV, made for TV horror is charming. It's usually not scary at all. Or you've got stuff like Killdozer, which has such a ridiculous concept that all you can really do is laugh. But this must have blown people's minds a little bit. Because there are genuinely, and I'm not even just talking about the iconic Ralphie at the window scene, which was burned into my brain forever. But the first glimpse we get of what Barlow actually looks like, which is a jump scare. This scene where Barlow shows up in the Petrie's kitchen and kills Mark's parents right in front of him.
Bonks them to death.
Bonks their heads together and
straight out of Jason Goes to Hell.
Right. But just you've got this lead in where it's like an earthquake is happening, and it's just like this must have freaked people the hell out in 1979.
We should consider maybe taking on the Night Stalker TV movie as a compare. I didn't even think about it, but at some point here, as we're continuing on with vampires, just as a comparison point to see where the fright factor was in the 70s, because that's the other, outside of Dark Shadows. Which
let's also not forget that vampires at this point were seductive. They were elegant, and now you have a blue Nosferatu.
Yes. We are knee deep in sexy vampire times.
Yeah, this came out like the same year as the Frank Langella Dracula.
Right. And while Frank Langella, by all accounts, turned out to be not a nice person, but what you can say is that in that movie, he's sexy as fuck.
Yeah, and these aren't sexy vampires.
No,
these are
there's nothing sexy.
They're animals. This is a disease.
Yes. It has more to do with the sort of zombie fiction. And I don't think it's, I think it's on purpose, that scene with the Glick boys in Mark's bedroom when they ask what a ghoul is, because these vampires have a little more in touch with the ghoul than the vampire that the normal CBS audience had encountered, especially in their homes on their TVs.
The sexiest it gets is when Susan shows up at the end and she's somehow acquired this like 1940s style dressing gown.
It's very, you can really see where Fright Night takes elements of this particularly this interpretation of the vampire myth, and combines it with, Rear Window, and it's a remix in a new and interesting direction and changing ages and all this sort of stuff. It plays in the same sandbox and makes something that is both similar and very distant. But that is one of those touchstones where you're like, oh yeah, I see exactly where this is coming from.
Yeah, I don't think I ever noticed before that the scene where the doctor, Ed Flanders' character, is going up the stairs at the Marston house. I'm like, oh, how did I not notice? It's just that this is just basically, when Martin Balsam's going up the stairs in Psycho. Like it's shot the exact same way.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those things when like someone says, oh, I don't know if Tobe Hooper would have been sophisticated enough to make something like Poltergeist. I'm like, you need to watch Salem's Lot, because he has a very deep and rich appreciation of cinema.
Yeah.
What he brings to the table, most people can't. And it's one of those things where I just think people underestimate him as a filmmaker. And here, there's a lot of TV formula sequences that you can feel them, just off camera stretch. But he's also trying to fill all the corners. He's trying to build up towards moments. There is a real rhythm to the movie that you start to get into. And for a fucking CBS TV movie, this is really fucking good.
It is. I watched it today and I'm like, yeah, this is still a solid movie. I'm not embarrassed to look back and say, yeah, that movie scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
And which brings us right back, because we touched on it, and Lord knows we have to talk about it. It's fucking amazing that the Glick window scenes. It's 1979, and it's cooler than anything in either of the remakes or in a bunch of the vampire movies that we've covered in and around here.
And it's just
really good.
It's just wire work, a fog machine, and reflective contacts. That's it. That is all that went into this scene.
And I will grant you that the plan for this is coming directly from the book. But it's one thing to write something in a book, and another thing for someone to translate that to the screen to scare the hell out of you that will pass the CBS censors in 1979. And what I think this does beautifully is sort of translate the anti-Peter Pan thing that obviously comes up a lot more in The Lost Boys, but it starts here. You don't have The Lost Boys without these sequences of these Glick kids coming to the window and just begging you to open the window, please. And it's both hypnotizing and fantastical. And you wonder how they're doing it. Is all in camera, baby.
Yeah.
There's one reverse shot that they're doing. Like Hooper's wants to make it just one extra element unreal. And he does the reverse of, instead of the vampire, moving their head to bite, they film it in reverse and then put it back into regular motion. And it seems unreal. It seems unnatural, and it fucking works.
Yeah. I don't even want to say like, oh, it was good for the time. It's still good now.
It's still good now.
And you know how you can tell it's still good? Because Midnight Mass still uses the reflective eyes. Now, yes. I mean, I don't know if they use the contacts or if it was, or this was CGI, but it's still, to very eerie effect.
Yes. Midnight Mass, and even something like Fright Night, which is also cribbing from this in a lot of different ways. They are remixing it to their own needs, but what they're taking from it are things that made those screenwriters and filmmakers be excited about telling a vampire story. And they want to honor it in some ways and evoke it in others, but take it in different directions. The power that this film has is still felt, and I just feel it's rather undeniable. And to reduce it down to, well, it's just a vampire story, I think does it a disservice.
Yeah.
Like there's one, it always gets me, and I don't know why, because it's real stupid. But after the Glick funeral, when everyone else is turning right out of the gates of the cemetery and Ben takes a left, that's filmmaking, baby.
Yeah.
That's telling you everyone else is probably dead meat here. Ben is going to survive this because when everyone else is turning right, he's brave enough to turn left and do something different. And that is part of how he survives this in the end. Petrie does the same thing. While he is prepared for this moment in the more, sophisticated Scream-like way of being a monster kid, it doesn't always help everybody. And he gets as many people killed as he saves in the end, or he actually gets more people killed because they're like, oh, I got to protect this kid. And like, oops, I just got this person vampirized.
Yeah.
We could have talked about this for two separate episodes.
We could just do like the Salem's Lot podcast.
Yeah.
Just break down every little aspect of it.
There's that much to be said about it. I feel like we're leaving a lot on the table. So there's not to say that we won't revisit this because.
Well, and for me, like it informs a lot of my tastes as a horror fan because it and I've mentioned this numerous times. It is one of the first horror movies I can remember seeing that made a big impact on me. And now, I mean, again, I was 7, which what the fuck were my parents even thinking? But like, I feel like it informs a lot of my tastes, even, some 45 years later.
There's just something to it. And it's a pretty decent King interpretation on top of it.
It is. It's a good interpretation of a great book.
Yeah. And it just goes, I think you're right. I don't know that any, it's not to say in 10, 15 years, someone isn't going to try to remake the fucking thing. I just think a movie trying to make a 2-hour movie of this is doing a disservice to what the buffet you're being presented with. I don't think you can just pick 4 or 5 things out of the buffet and say, here's an accurate representation of what the buffet delivers when it comes to this source material.
Right.
It's not what it's about. Again, it's not called Ben Mears. It's called Salem's Lot.
Exactly.
And if you're not delivering all that Salem's Lot thing, then what is the point? The question is, can anyone do it as well as Midnight Mass? And I guess my answer would be probably not.
No, I think that is going to be the bar that all further adaptations have to reach, and I don't know if anybody can do it.
Yeah.
I used to think I could do it.
He finds a way.
I used to think I could do it, but not, once I saw Midnight Mass, I was like, oh, fuck that.
I mean, because it's not called Salem's Lot and it is called Midnight Mass, it's allowed to use all those chess pieces in a completely different game and surprise you because it does remind one so much of Midnight Mass, or Salem's Lot, rather. And yet when it does not follow that exact formula, it allows surprise in a way that someone's steeped in this plot. I'm like, oh, I did not see that coming.
Right.
Whereas there's a lot of it I do kind of see coming, but it's delivered in a completely fresh and interesting way.
Right.
So that just about does it. I mean, your choices become a vampire, get stabbed on a wall,
or a heart attack,
or heart attack.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. My inclination would be become a vampire, but it doesn't seem like much fun.
This vampirism in the Stephen King universe, as far as I can tell, and he has a lot of different kinds of vampires, doesn't seem fun or cool.
No. You're disgusting. You're just, you can't seem to be able to talk anymore. You're hiding, these grimy little hiding places in the daytime. There's like nothing sexy about it. Like it's, I don't know. I guess heart attack, honestly.
Yeah. And none of the heart attacks seem fun either.
No, you're like
there's no quick heart attack. These are drawn out, poor terrible episodes.
Yeah, poor Matt/Jason takes about like 5 minutes to like stumble from the room where he sees Mike Ryerson to his own room.
Have you seen Return to Salem's Lot? Because I never have.
I am sure that I have. I do not remember much about it though. I understand that people's thoughts in it are decidedly mixed. People either love it or hate it.
I wonder if that's another thing we might consider doing here. I feel like we brought it up in private. We haven't really discussed it on the show. That we might continue on with vampires and just for season 6. Vampires will continue on and we just move franchises once we get through the Evil Deads because there's just too many fucking vampire movies.
Because there's so much. And yeah, we've barely
and I don't feel like I'm hating them. I don't feel like I'm to the point where I'm Jason Xing out of a franchise.
No, because there's so many different variations on it.
Because I'm thinking, Night Flyer. Like there's too many. That are too good not to be discussed. So yeah. And we have Return. We have the TNT version of Salem's Lot that could also be discussed. So there's that. Yeah. Dare we do a miniseries on Midnight Mass?
Oh, I would love to. I might cry during it.
I understand the impulse, but that is for another day. Please rate and review us on the podcatcher of your choice. Join us on Patreon for bonus episodes that I know that you will enjoy. Our artwork is done by Josh Hollis. Go to joshhollis.com for that. Go to Revenge Body Memphis at bandcamp.com for this remix and all of our other versions of our theme song. Gina, where can you be seen and heard on these here internets?
I write about television and movies and pop culture at ginawatchesthings.substack.com. And I am on most social medias with varying participation recently under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. And that just about does it for this episode of Kill by Kill, but don't worry, the body count will continue. For myself and for Gina, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
President Trump, why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I read where she was not black, and then I read that she was black.
Vice President Harris?
We have someone who wants to be president who has consistently attempted to use race to divide. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. We all have dreams and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.